Dr. Milgram, if you would.
Okay, I will use the podium because I want to be nearer to the Yes. Plus these electronic devices over at my Okay. So let me say that I'm going to do more of an analysis of the standards, some of the standards in Common Core in the low grade, so I don't have to worry about everybody understanding the math. And then I'm going to look about as closely, if not more so, at the first grade curriculum for the high achieving countries. And we will see how dramatically different these things are. I think the point I want you to come away with is this, that in order to do this right, and I think what you're charged with reporting is incredibly important. In order to do what you're charged with correctly, you have to emphasize to the next level committees that the reality in math is this. There are countries out there, and we can point to them. China, unfortunately, China is just enormous, and they are really beginning to get consistent and horribly good results, and we should be scared to death, because mathematical competence underlies economic health. And there are an awful lot of highly educated, highly capable Chinese, and the number's growing very fast. And then, of course, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, which is kind of China, and Singapore, and even India and Russia. These are high-achieving countries, and they achieve dramatically better results than we do. So we really ought to understand what it is they do in mathematics, why and why their curricula work and ours are junk. We really have to understand that before we even start. And the other thing I want you to take away from this, I won't go into detail here, but the group that is putting together the math standards for North Carolina has got to have involved in it, in a crucial way, actual serious research mathematicians. That failure to do this ultimately is one of the major things that you can track back where the failure of our standards and curricula start to occur. Okay, so that's what I want to. That's the point of what I want to talk about here. And now let's hope like mad I can work this thing. So let's start out very, very quickly by looking at, for something incredibly important, our national standards, the Common Core standards. Let's look at the lead writers. That didn't work. How do I get this to do? What button do I press here? If any. Okay. All right, I've got a button. And the other one reverses it? Yeah, goes back? Okay. All right, so here are the three people that were responsible for writing the Common Core. And I'm not bringing this up because of them or to criticize them in particular. I want you to understand the level at which they function. So here are the three people. Of the three, only Phil Darrow, whose college background was totally and English had any previous experience at all writing math standards. That in and of itself is astounding. And even the results, well, it was an unmitigated disaster. He was the lead author of the 1992 California Math Framework, which started with California right in the middle of the pack. 4 years later, 1996, California's 49th in the country. And the word in California was, thank God for Mississippi. Those standards precipitated the math wars and forced the California state legislature to have them entirely rewritten. Not content with that, he proceeded to lead the writing teams for Georgia and New Jersey, and had exactly the same results, but much faster. Somebody had learned something. Both McCollum and Zimble, on the other hand, had PhDs in mathematics, but neither one had any prior experience in writing mathematics standards. Perhaps this goes a long way to explaining the startling number of outright mathematical errors and errors in judgment that permeate Common Core. I'm not going to go into that too much, but in the handouts, the major handout details a small percentage of them. Admittedly, some of the more important ones, but it is only a small percentage of the problems. Now, I was going to play for you this marvelous recording of Tom Lehrer in 1965 called The New Math. And I'm not going to do that, but it is something you ought to look up on the web and play, because it absolutely says something. You look at it, you listen to it, and you say, that's what we're doing today. But it was a disaster in 1965. Why should it be any different today? Okay, so I thought, but now let's get to the meat of it. So here's an example, a third grade example of a procedure that in third grade in a Common Core line text is used to teach third graders subtraction. Well, you teach subtraction by adding. Nothing wrong with that. But look at what they do. They say 38 plus 2, that's 40. 40 plus 60, that's 100. Pull the 2 over, pull the 60 over. You get to 300 by adding 200, pull the 200 over. Then you add those up and you don't quite get there. So you add 25, and you get to 325. And now you can say that 325 minus 38 is that sum, and you can say that that sum is 287. It's incredibly convoluted, and this is in third grade. And by third grade, addition and subtraction should it be essentially automatic. Okay, anguished parents' comments, and I'm not here for those comments, I'm not really here for this example. What I'm here for this is to introduce the standards that are responsible for this mess. So the picture above that we showed you is from my third grader daughter's math book. This is the only page that explains their method for subtraction. This is the only page explaining that method. Not only that, this is the only example. And finally, the traditional method for subtracting with borrowing and carrying, etc., is called the granny method. And what can I say? So now let's look quickly at the key standards that that lead to this method. I'm looking now in first grade.
Dr. Milgram, just one question.
Yes.
The example you showed us, is that a Common Core aligned curriculum?
Yes,
I see.
it is indeed. This is an example that was sent to me about 2 months, 3 months ago.
But it's
And
not
does
a
it speak
standard.
to the
It's not a standard.
well, that's what
It's
I'm
not
wondering.
what?
It's not a standard. You said
That's not a
Common
standard.
Core aligned text.
That's, it's the method from an aligned text. Now I put up one there, I put up the actual standards that force the text to go in that direction. You may have trouble reading them. Well, aside from the fact that you can't see them. But you may have trouble reading them even from your text. In fact, they're very hard to read. Well, there are two other related standards that are a little shorter but are also part of this thing. And I'll read one of those because that you can read. Understand the meaning of the equal sign and determine if equations involving addition and subtraction are true or false. I don't know where to begin with that one. Who here can tell me the meaning of the equal sign? How about that? Hmm?
It is.
It is. No. Unfortunately, no. No. It's actually incredibly complicated. What the equal sign does is to construct a truth table.
That's not right.
Hmm?
That's not right.
Yes.
It does or doesn't.
But for every element that could be possibly part of the things that you're looking at, it constructs a truth table. Well, if you can't answer that right off the top of your head, this is for first grade. And now to read the next one, determine the unknown whole number in an addition or subtraction equation relating to three whole numbers. For example, any rate, convoluted, involuted, and way above grade level. Now, I told you you couldn't really read that first standard, so I decided to parse it for you. And what I've done is I've taken the relevant, quote, the real standard, add and subtract within 20, demonstrating fluency for addition and subtraction within 10, and then they start out, use strategies such as, and counting on and making it 10, those are two separate strategies. Decomposing a number, leading to a 10, that's the third. Using the relationship between addition and subtraction, that's the fourth. And creating equivalent but easier or known sums, that's the fifth. All of these are relatively independent, should have been independent standards, and should not have been in first grade. Although this original standard, add and subtract within 20, if they stop there, fine, no issue. Now, the rest of these on the right-hand side are EGs. So that is to say, those are examples within the standard, and I separated them out from the standard. Okay, so that's what we've got. We've got a standard that's really 5 separate standards, and there's no reason you should have been able to read that. And then the other standard I showed you, I also parsed that out, and again, the actual standard has 5 separate standards embedded in it. Okay. So now we take these together and we presume that with these we have, and again, I'm just pointing out again because it really offends me, this thing on equal sign. But, you know, when you look at it, there are 17 more standards in first grade. Well, what's the significance of that? All right, let's look at what they do in the high-achieving countries. Here is the total content of the first grade textbook from Russia from the 1980s. And this is it's this program that Singapore's program is based on. It's this program that China's program is based on. This is the total content of the first grade curriculum in Russia. What does it include? Well, it includes adding and subtracting the numbers from 1 to 10, and then the numbers from 1 to 100. And that's essentially it. A whole year devoted to that. These kids, when they're done, they understand addition, they understand subtraction, and they understand it really well. Actually, it's worth breaking this down a bit further. I've listed the main actual lessons in the book here, and there are 3 pages of them, and they're very short. There are only a few, relatively speaking, a few. And in the next page, I actually give some examples of problems from the book that that kids in our 3rd grade or 4th grade would have difficulty with, because our kids are simply not taught to that level. All right.
Make sure I understand, these examples are from first grade?
These examples are from first grade in this Russian text, which is generic. I mean, it's the text that's used fundamentally in all of the high-achieving countries.
And these are word problems versus just operations?
These are word problems. Yes. If we go back, and I know how to go back now. If we go back, the first sections there, the numbers from 1 to 10, there are virtually no word problems in those sections. The kids have not yet learned to read. But since Russian is phonetic, by the middle of the year, they have begun to learn to read. And so they can do word problems. So the next part involves a lot of word problems.
Do they have kindergarten?
Hmm?
Do they have a kindergarten?
No.
None of them come.
Not in the, well, yeah, not typically in those countries. And in fact, the first grade, typically they're 6, more likely, or well, 6 are more likely to be 7 when they take kindergarten. So they're usually about a year, maybe, roughly a year older in first grade than our kids are.
Like our kids.
But you see the dramatic difference in structure. You see that, and that's the thing I want to point out. There's something going on there. It took me a year to finally understand exactly what was going on, what was the mathematics behind it. It's not what you think, and it's not something I can talk about easily. Suffice it to say to the one person who will have no problem understanding this, that underlying all of this are the piano axioms. And you don't have to understand that.
The what? The what? Say that
The
word.
piano axioms. P-E-A-N-O. So there's definitely something there that we do not understand, and that we need to understand if we're going to do a job of writing standards that match up. And as Sandy was saying, create a situation where we know how and what level to train our prospective teachers to so that they can teach it properly. So how much time do I have left?
You've got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
The typical math brain is short and sweet to the point. I like that.
Okay. All right. All right, there's one thing that the parent I'm going to quote now actually is very knowledgeable, but has an 8-year-old daughter. And here's from this parent. I tried to prepare her in advance for what was going to happen in her school. I told her, the authors of Common Core and the education schools who design her curriculum hate children very much. I also told her that her teachers really care about children, but they don't know any better. And I hate to say it, but he really hit the nail right on the head. And this is what you really have to think about when you make your recommendations. This is the way it appears to the parents and even to me. So I'm not going to talk about the detailed problems with Common Core. It's not really worth that, because what I want to talk about now, I want to give you some idea that, sure, there are enormous problems in the early grades, but they're not, the problems with Common Core is just, they never go away. For me as a mathematician, the problems are far worse once you get to 6th and 7th grade, and then they're disastrous when you get to high school. So, I'm going to skip all of this stuff, and I want to get to the higher grades. And I'd like to focus on 2 areas quickly: ratios, rates, and proportions in middle school, and geometry in grades 8 through 12. And again, let me emphasize, I'm only looking at a small part of the issues you have to deal with. So, this was really frustrating. I had worked very hard with the authors, the writing team, and so had another member of the committee, Jerry Comfort, who's visiting here and looking at me with a kind of hostile look.
I can't live here. I live here.
You even live here. I worked very hard with them, and I know Jerry did as well. And we had, by the middle of May, we had the ratios, rates, and proportions only occurred in 6th and 7th grade, but we could comfortably live with the methods they were using and the things they were using. Both of us felt very strongly that it should occur the way it does in the high-achieving countries, where these topics start in 3rd grade. But that we weren't going to get. So these standards only appear in grades 6 and 7. In the early May version of Common Core, we were comfortable. It was reasonably well done. But when we saw the final version, when I read the final version about a year later, I was just horrified. There are errors all over in 2 short sections. There are errors in almost every one of the standards. And all sorts of misconceptions about what these topics are. And it was just, mathematically speaking, it was incredibly discouraging. So, just for comparison, I thought I would include a single problem from Japan. This is on a 6th grade national exam in Japan. A train crossed over a 970-meter long bridge in 95 seconds. The same train took 60 seconds to pass through a 480-meter long tunnel. How long was the train? This is a 6th grade problem in Japan. In this country, I don't think 10th graders could do it. I'm not sure that high school graduates could handle it. The correct answer is 360 meters. I'll give you that as a challenge problem. Yet, a sixth grader is expected to do this problem and take no more than 2 minutes doing it in Japan, in the high-achieving countries in general. This is the difference in level that we are talking about. Now, geometry is in many ways worse. And I think I won't go into any detail here. In this, I've listed a number of geometry standards that show a very unusual method being used to teach geometry. Now, this method was something they'd come up with, the writing team. By that point, the validation committee had been divested of all its authority to validate. And so we couldn't go in there and say, this is not going to work because research shows that this method was virtually identical to one that was tried in Russia back in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and only with their very best students, and had to be abandoned after a little more than 2 years because it was a complete disaster. So it didn't work with their best students, and we're going to use this to teach all our students. So again, this is an example where research is crucial. Knowledge of what goes on and what did go on in foreign countries is essential. And at the same time, a real knowledge of mathematics is critical if we're going to get good results. And I really, really hope that North Carolina can end up with first-rate standards. And I think I'll stop here.
Dr. Milgram, I'm sorry. Just one question before you. If you could just summarize for us, I mean, we listed a number of challenges, obviously, with the current standards and where they're deficient. And one of the points that I think I'm taking away from this is that we need to get a research mathematician to look at these standards. But do you have any other specific recommendations you can make?
Well, all of the recommendations that Sandy made, I fully concur with. Mm-hmm. But I, you know, in the case of mathematics, what I'm saying is that you've got to go further there, because in this case, the research is out there. The research is out there. It's just not done by us.
So, just to follow up on that, in terms of comparisons with other states prior to Common Core, I know California was a state, obviously, that had excellent math standards at one time, had to fix some standards. But what about other countries for comparison? I know you gave us Russia.
Because I explained that the Russian curriculum that I was showing you there is basically the grandfather curriculum of the curriculum in all of the high-achieving countries except Japan.
Okay, well, thanks again. So again, stand by. We will be back to you with our interactive discussion, and we're going to hear from Dr. Kurtz. Now, we spent these two sections talking about standards. And one of the things that's come through loud and clear, both of your comments, is that the need to make sure that we've got the structure, the foundation, to enable any standards to be effectively deployed and used. So Kevin, I'm hoping that you will talk to us a little bit about your experience in actually seeing that kind of come into fruition.
Now are we breaking us on that?
Can we take a 5-second
Can you
break?
take 10 minute break?
Joshua, No, that's absolutely fine, that's what I was asking, I saw that.
All right, well,
right
thank
before
you, we'll
meeting
be
the
back
agenda.
then, let's come back at 2:45.
Yes.